welcome to another episode of the Thomas Clan Garden. Today we're going to be talking about tomatoes, which anybody who knows me personally can tell you is the pride and joy of my garden, as well as many other people at home. Now, tomatoes is probably one of the things that I've been growing the longest. I started with my dad when I was very, very little, and my grandfather as well. And so I just want to show you a couple of tips on what I do to get these gigantic plants, even in a really, really bad weather year for tomatoes, and hopefully a lot of production. So if you want to come in a little closer. Now, the first thing is a lot of people will have varying opinions on single stemming or pruning or suckering tomatoes, depending on what you want to call it, in which we do sucker our tomatoes, but one thing to keep in mind is that you only sucker indeterminate variety tomatoes. Now, if you don't know the difference, determinate varieties are plants that will grow, spread out once, produce fruit, and then that's it. They'll start to die off. Indeterminate varieties will live as long as weather conditions and environment allows it to. The plant will never die. Unfortunately, because we live in New England, every winter our indeterminate varieties die shortly after the first frost. But again, if we had planted one inside and it got enough light, it could live potentially forever and it'll just keep growing. So if you want to come in a little bit closer here. Now, this is one of our Brandywine pink tomatoes, which is actually one of my favorite varieties. I actually like it better than the Brandywine red. I actually like the flavor a little bit. It's an ugly, ugly tomato, to be honest, but it's delicious, and I'm all about the flavor. So the first tip, as we're talking about suckering, the best way to sucker, oh, we got a new tomato here, I didn't see that yesterday, is you're going to follow the main stem. Now, we do have one right here. Now, this is actually sucker branch I didn't break off when the plant was small, because when I first put them out, all the suckers were small, and because of the really cold weather, I didn't want to overshock the plant, so I left it in. Unfortunately, by the time I got around and refound that sucker vine, it had grown fairly large and already started developing these flowers here, and so I'm kind of letting it go. So actually, one thing that you can do, you can notice that there's no more flowers past this point. So you can still actually trim this particular sucker, and the way to do that is you go just past where the flowers are, in which I'm going to do a diagonal cut right here. Now, what's going to happen is that's going to harden off. It's not going to grow any further, or shouldn't grow any further, and it's going to allow all the energy to go into the flower right here, which I'm actually going to trim the whole thing down because there's no other flowers on this. And you know, once this produces the flowers, the tomatoes that it's going to produce, I'll trim off the rest of this branch as well. Now, one thing that I like to do now, if you watch enough of these videos, you know every time I weed, all the grass clips, everything is going over into the hugelkultur to really build it up. I'm kind of building it slowly instead of all at once, which I hope you watch the video on the hugelkultur I'm going to be making soon. But what I do when I sucker and trim my tomatoes, I actually keep the tomatoes, the tomato branches there, because you know, what it's doing is as it decomposes, it's putting the soil, a little bit of the nutrients back into the soil that the tomato needs, because it was the tomato plant. So I'm gonna keep trimming these up, and I'll check back in with you, show you a little bit of an update in a couple of minutes. All right, so the second tip today for our tomatoes is to talk about the flowers. How we're gonna get a better pollination rate and get more tomatoes on the vine. Now, what many people don't know is that tomato flowers, okay, contain both male and female pollinators inside of them, and basically all they actually need is vibration to pollinate. They don't need bees. They don't need any other type of pollinating insects or birds. All they need literally is vibration. Now, they can get that from the wind, which is, you know, naturally going to pollinate them. But to increase the percentage of pollination, you can actually be the vibrator yourself. You can pollinate your own tomatoes. Now, it's a very, very simple method to do, so I'm just going to show you. So I'm going to take this cluster here. This is a small cluster, and basically all you're going to do is just going to, you know, I just do it like this, where you're just vibrating the flowers, and, well, I'm kind of vibrating the whole plant because they're in kind of close together. I'm going to do this one too. And so, you know, you don't need to worry about being too gentle with it. As you can see, I'm kind of shaking it pretty vigorously. Because, you know, this stem is actually pretty strong, which it needs to be, especially on larger tomatoes like the Brandywine that we're looking at here, in which it's, you know, by shaking it, it's actually allowing the male part, which is in the back of the tomato, to fall into the female part, and will actually allow for that better pollination. So as you're caring for your tomatoes, you know, you can just go through. I mean, I've got 35 tomato plants right now, and I can take care of all of them, 24 of which currently are flowering. Again, the other 11, if you've been watching the videos, were actually sucker branches I broke off, let root, and are now growing. But I can take care of all 24 and vibrate all of the flowers every day. Probably only takes me about 10 minutes total to do all of that, and to double, triple, possibly even quadruple the amount of pollinated tomatoes is just a fantastic idea for a large family, so we can make lots of sauce, so we can make, you know, can a lot of tomatoes, and also eat a lot of tomatoes. You pollinating my tomatoes? Okay. Alright, so as you're going through, traditional suckers are going to be like this, or possibly even smaller. And so this is a traditional small sucker root, in which you have, this is the leaf branch here, this is the main growth stem here, and so at this 45-degree angle coming out, that's a sucker root. So you just basically take it, snap it off, and like I said, I kind of leave them to grow and decompose into the ground right where the tomatoes are, so that way they're pollinating our wonderful plants. And I think Nathaniel is trying to sucker plants himself over there. Yeah, he did. He actually broke one off. Good job. So, okay, so I'm gonna keep going here. Here's a nice small sucker, by the way. This one's just starting, so we're getting it right at the beginning. And like I said, you just peel it off and you're good. Mom. So that's all for the tomatoes today. Stay tuned for more tomato videos. I love my tomatoes, so you're going to see a lot more of them before the end of the year. So for Mr. Tyler, Little Nathaniel, and for Shawn and everybody else in the Thomas clan, we want to say bye, and we'll see you again very soon.